Hello and welcome to the session titled How and Why You Should Start a High Impact Nonprofit with Steve Thompson. I'm Zainab Chira and I'll be the MC for this session. Following a 40-minute talk by Steve, we'll move on to a live Q&A session where he will respond to your questions. You can submit questions through Swapcard. Then after 10 minutes of questions, we'll bring the Q&A to an end. If you have any other questions for Steve or the Charity Entrepreneurship team, you can join their office hours happening straight after the session on Zoom. But now I'd like to introduce our speaker for this session. Previously a leadership development consultant, Steve Thompson co-founded Training for Good, the Incubation Charity, and also worked with Charity Entrepreneurship. Here's Steve.
Your career, talent, and time are the most valuable assets you have to help improve the world. So can you imagine the impact that you could achieve by starting a whole new charity? I'm Steve, I co-founded Training for Good, and I work with Charity Entrepreneurship. And prior to this, I worked in the corporate sector as a leadership consultant. And the purpose of this short session is to give you the opportunity to really consider if founding a charity is for you. Okay, so you're probably immediately thinking about, well, fit, failure, and alternatives. But before we get into all of that, let's look at why being a founder is even worth considering. And as we do, I should, a hefty disclaimer here. I'm totally biased. As I said, I work for Charity Entrepreneurship. I launched my own charity. And so a healthy pinch of salt would be appropriate here as you listen to me. But we're going to look at things like scale, neglectedness, tractability, those kinds of things. When you think of a hero, you might think of somebody like this, the paramedic, or one of these guys. But few people think of Ellie Hassenfield or Esther Duflo. But these are people, real people, entrepreneurs, charity founders, and they've saved a life, indeed many lives perhaps, for every day they've lived. So let's take a look at a couple of specific people like this, and maybe they're a little bit more relatable as well. So 2 years ago, the research team at Charity Entrepreneurship identified lead poisoning as a pressing and under-resourced problem. It causes 902,000 deaths a year, 1 trillion in lost income globally, but there was only about 11 million in donor funding going to it. So it's costing trillions and it's getting 11 million. So we recruited Jack and Lucia, 2 young EAs, very much like many of you, to start the lead exposure elimination project. Neither Jack or Lucia had any experience in lead or poisoning or lobbying governments. They were smart and committed and willing to step up to the plate and try. And within 3 months, they convinced them allowing Bureau standards to enforce regulations and to get lead paint off the shelves. 2 years on, their work has protected about 215,000 children from lead poisoning, and this is the equivalent of about 43,000 DALI equivalents averted. So not too bad. And now they've ongoing campaigns in 8 countries, and they're just getting started. And this talk is about how we find these ideas, how we train those founders, and how well it works, and why, most importantly, it might be for you. So I want you to imagine that Rob Mather, who started the Against Malaria Foundation, just decided not to start it. Just for a moment, just consider that. So he could have just stayed in his consulting job, but he didn't. He stepped up to the plate. He didn't have a lot of experience with anti-malarial bed nets. He didn't have much expertise in malaria, but he just said, this has to happen. Nobody else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. So just imagine for a moment he hadn't done that. That's 200 million bed nets that wouldn't have been distributed. 200 million bed nets that wouldn't have gone out there and saved lives. He saved maybe about 3 lives just since I've been talking. In fact, if we zoom out a little bit, all of the GiveWell top recommended charities were started by someone, a person, who really didn't know how it would go, and it's almost certain none of them knew how important their work would become. In fact, GiveWell itself. Imagine Ellie Holden or Ellie just stayed as an investment analyst. That means no GiveWell and no open fill. But going even further, imagine Will McCaskill hadn't started Giving What We Can and CEA and EAGs by extension. So all of us here today, much of the good that we will do in our careers stems in part from a founder, from somebody pushing over the first dominoes and creating the container within which we'll all act. Joey Savoy from Charity Entrepreneurship. He started Charity Entrepreneurship. So if he hadn't done that, perhaps all of the charities that CE have launched, all 23 of them, a lot of that good would just evaporate from the planet. So sometimes the most important thing to do is to say, I'll do it. I'll step up to the plate. And ultimately, everything is started by someone, and we need more someones. So GiveWell, Animal Charity Evaluators, Founders Pledge, and so on. All of these things just wouldn't exist. So let's zoom in on on what someone might need to start a charity to address, right? So here's a slum in Lucknow in India, for example, and we see the need for charities maybe to focus on sanitation or education, nutrition, causing stunted development in children, economic barriers maybe, but then there's violence, particularly violence against women, and so on and so on. And this is just in one slum. But what if we zoom out to the entire city? Well, there's 65,000 slums in Lucknow alone. And then if we zoom out far more to the entire province, we see many more. And then if we zoom out to the whole country and indeed out to the whole world. So there's just so much need, there's so much scope for charities. And that's not to mention all of the other problems and opportunities that we could say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to step up to the plate. Mental health, forced migration, food security, gender inequality, peace, so on, biorisk. There's just so many areas and so few people willing to step up to the plate. It's very neglected. How many people would you say are actually working on AI safety at the moment? Okay, AI, AGI in particular is potentially going to very negatively affect billions of lives in the future. And yet some estimate that as few as 300 people are actually working as their job full time, specifically on AI safety. 300 people on the entire planet. So I think there's room for a few more. What percentage of EA funding is actually being deployed at the moment? Would you say it's 50%? Would you say it's 10%? Well, it's probably closer to 1%, simply because there aren't enough great charities to invest in. There was a recent call for ideas and projects. FTX got 1,700 applications and funded about 70 of them. So there just isn't enough really high quality charities being started. We need a pipeline. We need a pipeline for GiveWell and for animal charity evaluator type charities to take, and these take years to get going through the piloting stage, and we're not seeing enough coming through. Then consider the number of EAs, right? Let's just say very simply that there's 20,000 of us, with most orgs having about 10 staff or so on average. So that means we would need to create like about 1,900 new organizations just to absorb the current talent pool to get everyone working on the world's most pressing problems. The most upvoted post on the EA forum was about how frustrating it is that there's so few jobs in EA. And this is only going to get more pronounced as EA grows. It'll take leaders, founders, people like you who say, you know, well, we can't wait for someone else to do it. I have to step up. And don't forget, you don't need to be absolutely the smartest person. The best founders, what they do is they create containers and then attract the smartest people into them and give them, you know, the place within which they can work on really important stuff. Currently, we have hundreds of super smart researchers without clear direction. And the best bit is you can use those super smart people to figure out the direction. But they need leadership. They need somebody to step up to the plate and say, right, we're going to do this together. Lastly, just consider the replaceability here. So, you know, maybe there's another job that you're considering, and maybe it's an ops job in an EA org. Great, super. But it's very likely that somebody else would be willing to take that job, and they do a good job. Whereas when it comes to starting a new organization, then it's very unlikely that somebody will step up to the plate and take your place. So all of that impact that you could have kind of evaporates if that's the case. Okay, so moving on. Can we remove the barriers and get these kinds of charities launched? And if we do they have the impact? Well, to address this, the first thing I need to say, and I need to be very, very clear in this, is that CE, Charity Entrepreneurship, our organization, doesn't have the monopoly on starting charities at all. In fact, most of the exceptional charities in the world, nearly all EA orgs, for example, weren't started by Charity Entrepreneurship. But given that I work with CE, it's what I can speak to and it's what I know more about. So we're going to be focusing there, but I just want to make that very clear from the start. Okay, so in CE, through our program of starting charities, about 40% are estimated to exceed the cost effectiveness of the strongest charities in their fields and have been supported by multiple independent bodies like Open Philanthropy, GiveWell, EA funds, that kind of thing. So we reckon about 40% of those that come on the program, of the charities that we start, will go on to become GiveWell recommended or equivalent leaders in their respective fields. About 40% or 2/5 make real progress, but remain at a smaller scale, and about 1/5 shut down in their first 24 months or so without having had a significant impact, which, by the way, is something that we really encourage, because if the program isn't working, the pilots come back with information that it just hasn't worked, it's great to pivot and move to something else. So we would seek that. But just contrast that for a moment in the for-profit world, where you typically see about 90% of startups failing. Here we're at about a 20%, and I don't think failure really captures what happens here. It's more like the founders identify something that's even more powerful that they could be doing, and they go off and do that. This is our track record. We've created 23 charities over the last 4 or 5 years. You can have a look there across them all. You might recognize some of the brands or some of the logos or whatever, and not have even realized that they were launched by CE. And we've helped them with seed funding of about 2.5 million, and they've gone on to raise well over 10 million themselves already, from some of the most respected funding sources. And between them, they've helped significantly more now than 1.6 million animals and 5 million people. So our charity is taking, it's kind of seeding all of that impact. So we're really, really proud of what the guys have been doing. There's a whole bunch of other benefits to this career path. You can have a quick look at them on the screen there. Building your skills and your career capital, it's incredibly fast. The job satisfaction is just off the charts, and so on. And then there's a whole bunch of intangible follow-through effects as well, or flow-through effects. But that's a whole bunch of pros for becoming a founder, but what about the cons? It's certainly challenging, and it's definitely not for everyone. So why not? Why would you not start a charity and do this? Well, our best estimate is that if you can, for example, earn to give and donate more than $200,000 per year to GiveWell, then you would probably be better off doing that than being a founder on average. So it's kind of the expected value of each founder that comes through the program is roughly the equivalent to 200,000 a year. So if you can do more than that by earning to give, we suggest you do that. Secondly, if you have a really, really strong idea and you've done a huge amount of research on it and a lot of experience in it, and its cost effectiveness and its expected value are super high, then maybe stay and do that. We don't have the monopoly on good ideas. Equally, you can send us your idea, and we may conclude that the best thing to do is to start an org with that idea and to help you do so. Also, if you have a comparative advantage or domain expertise in something especially impactful, then it's possible that really leveraging that could be better. Some people are just really well placed for careers in high impact policy, for example. And don't be a founder if it just doesn't line up for you, if it just doesn't feel like this sits well with your values. And there's, a whole bunch of challenges that come with it as well. There's uncertainty, it's failure, that can happen. And there's financial limitations. It can be quite lean for the first few years. Work-life balance can be very tricky, and so if you've recently had big changes in your life, maybe this isn't the ideal time, but that's for you to consider. And importantly, I think it's worth saying that the work just isn't very glamorous. I spend nearly all my time in meetings or in Google Docs. So yeah, just consider what it would be like to be actually doing this. And then there are the really big barriers, and this is what we really want to speak about today. So, you have to have a really good quality idea, one that's well researched, that makes sense, that, has the ability to translate or potentially translate into a huge amount of real impact. You'll need a great co-founder that'll complement your skills and your strengths, and you'll need a bunch of skills and knowledge, not to mention there's all the red tape and the admin and the network and all that kind of stuff. And lastly, of course, you're going to need the funding. So it's, there's a lot of challenges and barriers here. So with all of that in mind, let's get into what Charity Entrepreneurship does, what our incubation program is all about, and how we aim to help you, and how we aim to address those barriers and to be the antidote, as it were. So our mission at Charity Entrepreneurship is for more high impact charities to exist in the world. We are, let's say, roughly 50% a research organization and 50% an incubation and training org. The research team spends over 1,000 hours a year collecting and identifying the most promising charity ideas. And then we recruit, train, and fund people like you to start them. And that's why we're here today. So we've built a program to address all of the major barriers. We provide you with the idea. So that's where the research team comes in. I'm going to speak to that just for a moment, and then we'll come back to the other parts of the program. So how this works. Well, each year the research team goes out to the community and the literature and searches for literally hundreds of ideas for promising charities. They then get all these ideas get pushed into a funnel and get kind of go through multiple rounds of increasingly in-depth research to find the very best 3 or so ideas. So we start with hundreds and we whittle them all down to 3. It's a very negative process where we're constantly removing ideas because they didn't quite match up. And traditionally the research has targeted ideas that are at least 5 times as effective as the Against Malaria Foundation. So that changes depending on how hit-spaced we're trying to be, and things change over time, but that's a good kind of simplistic benchmark to have in your mind. So one of our ideas, if you pick it up and run with it, you are starting with something that has an amazing amount, I think, of promising in the core concept, promisingness, let's go with that, in the core concept. Here are some of the ideas that we're interested in launching in 2023. Because once the research process is finished, what we do is we turn these ideas into quite in-depth reports and we publish those on our website. So these are the ideas we're going with in 2023. Yeah. Okay, so that's the funnel. So once we have the ideas in place, then we attract people onto the program. And we do an awful lot of time. We do an awful lot of effort and time goes into recruiting and vetting to find potential founders to come on our 2-month incubation program to get trained up to actually start these ideas. So we typically receive over 1,000 or more, maybe even 2,000 applications, and we take changes all the time, but between 20 and 40 people roughly are coming on the program. So it is highly competitive. We do recruit from all over the world, and the reason we're here today is because we know that the next founders are likely, could be in this conference. So here are some of the people we've recruited in the past. You see that there's a good geographic spread, and here's a happy bunch of incubatees from one of the previous programs. So what is the incubation program and how does it all work? Well, first of all, we do cover stipends during and after the program. So this covers your cost of living because it's full-time. It's 7 weeks with 1 week, 7 weeks online with 1 week in person. We bring you into this community of founders, and so you're wrapped in with the other founders who have gone before you and can learn from them and their templates and that kind of stuff. We provide legal, admin, and bookkeeping support and getting you past the red tape and the templates and all that kind of stuff. And we give you access to the seed funding network. And I'll come into that in a moment, but basically we have a 100% success rate in getting funding within about a week of the projects being kind of articulated. So how does the program go? Well, it starts off with 6 weeks book club, about an hour a week getting to know each other and the theory. So this gets a lot of the reading and the theory out of the way before the program starts properly. So after about 6 weeks of doing that, then the program kicks off. And like I said, it's 7 weeks. It's full on. It's very, very full time. And there's 1 week in person, typically in London, where we bring you over. We put you up, make sure that costs are covered for that. But yeah, so it's roughly 7 or 8 weeks long. And when I came on the program about just over a year ago, I thought we'd come in on Monday morning as the first day and we'd meet Joey or we'd meet one of the other great lecturers and they'd introduce themselves and we'd go through a talk and then we'd go into Zoom rooms and we'd go to breakouts and all this kind of stuff. Wasn't like that at all, not even a little bit. Monday morning of the first day, we get this email which says, hey, here are the 10 projects or assignments you're to do for the week, and here are the 10 people from the program you're to do them with. So you're just thrown straight into the deep end. Here's a bunch of lectures, here's the assignments, now go. So I was a bit shocked, but I thought it was very cool. I loved it. And we're just straight into the thick of it, trying to, you bump into things, you get loads of feedback, you're working with the other participants on the program. So really what's going on is that for the first month of the program, you're trying out these different assignments and you're trying your fit with the other, incubatees, the other participants on the program. So in the morning, I might be working with one of them on a pitch or a budget, and in the afternoon, I might be working with another person from the program on a 5-year plan or some kind of M&E strategy or something like that. So you're getting to try out what it's like working with these people in fast-paced, challenging assignments that have clear deadlines. And it's a very good way to understand how well you work together. And then at the end of each week, you give feedback to CE to say, hey, I got on really, really well with this person, not so much with that person, and I'm leaning more and more towards this idea. So as the weeks move on, you're narrowing in, and we're giving you more time with the people that you work better with and less time with the people who your match isn't quite so good with. So you're getting closer and closer. So roughly by the end of the first month, you've decided who you want to work with and which charity idea you're most kind of excited by and have best kind of comparative advantage for. And then you spend the second month working with that person on that charity idea for real now. So rather than doing the assignments kind of for the sake of doing the assignments, in the second month, you're doing them to actually build the, the project plan, the measurement and evaluation, the budget for the charity that you're now going to launch, so that by the end of the second month, you have this stack of projects that are all done. And that's going to enable you to put that together into a proposal for funding. And it's that proposal for funding that CE then take away, bring it to their network of funders, of seed funders. And typically within a week or so, nearly all of the projects get funded. And we're seeing people get funding of up to $200,000. So it takes about a week, and then about a week later, the funding arrives in your bank account, and a week later, you've launched the charity. So it's very, very immediate upon completion of the program, if that's what you choose to do. So some of the stuff that's actually on the program, some of the content would be monitoring and evaluations and basic statistics, a lot on decision making. The majority of it is around decision making and making really, really good quality decisions, even under uncertainty about what direction your charity is going to take. So you'll work on task management, organizational prioritization, forming a board, budgets and legalities, all these kinds of things. All very supported, all with templates, and people have done all of this before when you come to it. So you're very much like going, okay, how's it been done in the past, right? We're going to do the equivalent of that, but for this new charity idea in our own way. So like I said, that leads up to your proposal, which is like maybe a 10-15 page document that goes away for funding, and the seed funding typically comes in within a week, as I said. So in short, Charity Entrepreneurship, we have the ideas, we have the funding. What we need are more courageous people to step up to the plate and say, you know what, I'm willing to give this a really good shot. Couple of examples now. So we're going to take a step back and take a quick look at a few people who have done this in the past. People who have come on our program and where they're at now. So the first example is Fortify Health. So this is Nikita and Brandon, two young people, no majorly relevant experience, but they stepped up to work to reduce anemia and its long-term health effects, particularly in children at scale in India, by partnering with mills who fortify flour with iron and folic acid and vitamin B12 and that kind of thing. So it's such a simple idea in one sense. We need to get these vital nutrients into millions of kids, right, to stave off all sorts of health problems. Okay, so how do we do that? We could send out tablets, but that's extremely expensive, and then they're not necessarily going to take them, and it's very hard to track. So what if we just put the nutrients into the flour at source in the major mills, and then that gets distributed to the wholesalers, who in turn distribute it to the bakers, who in turn distribute it to the villages. So this is working. We're a few years on, and they're delivering those crucial nutrients to about 192,000 children every single day. This has been so effective that GiveWell have just given Fortify Health a $8.2 million grant, scale-up grant. So just take a moment just to think that through for a moment. Two young people, just like you, started this charity. And a few years on, they're getting 8 million from GiveWell, and they're getting their nutrients into 192,000 children every single day. What would it feel like if you woke up tomorrow and you knew that because of you, there's 192,000 children that were getting that kind of thing? Just think about how that would feel. I know it's a very un-EA thing to do. It's just to actually tap into your feelings and imagine what it would be like to get up in the morning and do that. but I think it's a really important thing. Does that excite you? Does that fill you with motivation? Okay, so that's Nikita and Brandon. Next up, we have the Fish Welfare Initiative. So this is Tom and Haven, and they were incubated in 2019, and their organization improves the welfare of farmed fish, primarily in India. Fish are very numerative. There's an awful lot of fish being farmed, and there's good reason to think that they are very capable of a lot of suffering. So what the guys in the Fish Welfare Initiative have been doing is they've been collaborating with farmers to improve the water quality and to lower the stock densities of the fish in these farms. And so far, it's over 1 million fish, or a million animals as a consequence of their work, that aren't spending pretty much their entire lives gasping for oxygen, thanks to Tom and Haven and the team. So again, we're thinking about what would it feel like if that was very salient for you. Would that be very motivating? Third example, Family Empowerment Media. So this is Anna, Christina, and Ken. And what they do is they run ads educating families, primarily in Nigeria, about contraception and family planning. So radio programs, radio ads, just basically saying, hey, here's some facts about contraception. And they did a 3-month pilot relatively recently, and it's estimated just that one pilot alone has been estimated to have averted 70 maternal deaths. And by 2026, they expect to be able to avert a death for $2,600. So that's 30% more cost effective than even GiveWell's most cost effective charities. 30%, plus their intervention is super scalable. So we have very high hopes for FEM. They've done amazing work to date. And yeah, it just seems like another standout charity. The most effective charity of them all, and I'm kidding here clearly, is Training for Good, because I co-founded it. So together with Jan Willem and Gillian, we are an EA meta charity, and we provide training and placements into highly promising career paths. So we're helping people like you break into impactful careers in journalism, in biopolicy, and AI policy. So it's a very different type of charity than the ones I was mentioning before. So I just wanted to illustrate that. So again, here are the charities that we've incubated over the last few years. We've 4 or 5 new ones coming out just now, in the last couple of months. So we're really excited to see where they go next. And we expect this number to double in the next couple of years as well. So yeah. So what's next? Well, it's worthwhile knowing that in February, March, we're running a program, our incubation program. So we're actually running it twice in 2023. So the first one is in February, March, and this is around animal advocacy, as well as 2 global health and development charities, so tobacco taxation and road traffic safety. Yeah. And then we're running a second program in July, August 2023, and this will focus on biorisk, health security, and that kind of thing. So pandemics, antimicrobial resistance, antibiotics policy, those kinds of ones. The applications are open now for both of those programs, so you can actually apply to either the February, March, or the July, August one, or both. And the deadline is the 31st of October. So strongly suggest you have a look at that. Take our quiz. So on our website, there's a short quiz. It asks you a bunch of questions, and it kind of helps you assess whether or not you think you'd be a good fit for charity entrepreneurship. Also, you can sign up for our newsletter. And most importantly, you could come to our office hours as part of this conference. So I'd love to meet and chat with you and answer any questions that you have, because I know this has been very quick. Some common concerns that we often talk to people about, so some things that might be going on in your mind, is I don't have a great idea. That's fair. I didn't have a great idea for a charity when I started it. I was lucky enough to pick up one of the charity entrepreneurship ideas. So that's one of the reasons we do that, is that it's very rare to come across a great entrepreneur who also has done the research. So yeah, hopefully you understand that. You prefer your own idea. That's absolutely fine. Or CE's ideas aren't for you. So 2 things on this. Yes, if you do have your own idea, we would love to hear from you. But do recognize that our bar is, typically or traditionally was 5 times as effective as the Against Malaria Foundation in expectation. So if it's significantly lower than that, then, grapple with why we would want to really put all our energy into starting that rather than one of these other ideas, because then obviously we would be losing the difference. Alternatively, you might just feel, oh, okay, so none of the particular ideas on the ticket this year, as it were, are for me. None of those animal ideas or none of those biorisk ideas are particularly lighting me up. That's totally fair. I would say, however, that one of the most common things we hear from the participants on the program is that how often they change their mind. And I certainly experienced this myself, that during the program, I was constantly pivoting between different ideas. As I learned more about them, I got much more excited. And so to take a cursory look at the ideas as they are in the reports and then go, yeah, that doesn't really do it for me, I think it's kind of missing an opportunity. So expect yourself to, if you were to engage with it more and really dig in and really think through the cost effectiveness and the level of impact that's potentially there, expect that your motivation for that idea would significantly rise. There's very good evidence that that's the case from everybody else who's been on the program, or many other people that have been on the program. Another misconception or concern is that there's 3,000 people are going to apply for this and I won't get in. It's totally fair. Yes, the majority of people will not get in because it's a recruitment funnel, and that's always the case. But it's more like, is the upside worth the effort? And I'll speak in a couple of moments about our application process and how we've tried to make that as valuable as possible. But also I would just qualify this 3,000 number and say, look, in real terms, we don't get 3,000 applications. We get a number of 100 applications per round that are highly relevant, and that the people are, well versed in what we do and have really read the website and stuff. So we get an awful lot of applications that aren't really applicable, shall we say. So if you're an EA and you're attending a conference like this, you're definitely in the running. You're in the mix of people that are quite likely to get in. Yeah. Okay. I lack the relevant expertise. Well, yeah, I think this is a legitimate concern. I think there is a lot of, there's a lot of expectation that you're supposed to be superhuman and have just be unbelievably high performing and these kinds of things. And it's just not true. It's not fair. And yes, we recruit for very, very good people, but we don't recruit for superhuman people. And when it comes to expertise specifically, and almost none of us have the expertise in the particular charity idea that we go ahead and launch. Jack and Lucia didn't know much about lead exposure or lead poisoning before they started that. Family Empowerment Media didn't know anything about radio ads before they started, and so on and so on. It's just the same story again and again. It's more, are you willing, not are you a 100% expert today? It's more, are you willing to commit to this and to become an expert over the 2 months of the program and the first year of running your charity? It's, are you willing to become obsessed and become an expert rather than are you already one? Another common concern is it's very risky, I might fail. This is totally understandable, and yes, it's possible that you'll fail, but I think it's worth really thinking through what you mean by failure. So failure in the for-profit space might be that you rack up a load of debt, you end up in court, bankrupt and these kinds of things, and it's just not possible in the charity sector. You can't actually go into debt. So failure really looks like you spend a year or two giving it a go, you learn a bunch of things, and you learn that it doesn't work, and you write that all up. You contribute that to the community, and then you pivot away and you do something else, hopefully leveraging a lot of the experience that you've had. That seems to me like pretty much the worst case scenario for failure here, which isn't exactly a terrible downside. So I think it's worth thinking through what you really are afraid of in terms of failure. We encourage and expect a certain number of the charities to fail, because that means we're pushing things and we're pushing things towards their limits, and that's a good thing. So if nobody was failing, then we're clearly nowhere near pushing ourselves hard enough. I'm too young, I'm too old, I'm too specialized, it's too far away, all of these concerns. So some of these are a little bit more legitimate than others, but in the whole, they're not really things that we bet on or pay too much attention to in the vetting process. We've had 19-year-olds on the program. We've had 60-somethings on the program. I'm certainly one of the older people that's been on the program. But yeah, it's just not something that's a major consideration. Can it be far away? Yes. Are you willing to move for this is a good question to ask yourself. The guys who set up the Fish Welfare Initiative, for example, have spent quite a lot of time in India. That's totally, that's a part of that deal. Whereas on the other hand, in Training for Good, we're all still working remotely and probably will for the foreseeable future. So none of us have had to move at all. So it really depends on what kind of charity you start. I don't know if I'm a good fit is a very common concern we hear. And this is something that's totally reasonable. Of course, you don't know if you're a good fit because you've never been a charity entrepreneur before, so you don't really know what it takes. Plus, we're all very biased about ourselves. We typically in EA, we have a lot of imposter syndrome and we don't think that we're good enough or that we think other people are even more impressive or whatever happens to be. And I would say that, in this case, it's kind of legitimate that you don't know if you're a good fit because, as I say, you've never done this before. But we know what makes a good fit because we've been doing this for many years and we've built up a pretty good profile and understanding of what it takes. And we're going to be able to tell you whether or not you'd be a really good fit. So the best way to figure out if you could be a good fit is to apply, and then we'll figure it out together, as it were, rather than, well, I don't know if I'm a good fit and then not applying. Well, then you don't know, you don't learn anything that way. So yeah. You might think that you're not ready. This can be true, obviously, depends on how fresh out of college you might be or how fresh out of school you might be, whatever it happens to be. And we'll say that we've had people on the program and people who started up charities that didn't finish college. We've had people who have a lot of experience and then came into it and realized, whoa, my experience just actually isn't nearly as relevant as I thought it was. I'm going to have to learn here. So your readiness isn't really, are you ready on day one? It's really rather, can you get ready by using the program? Because remember, obviously nobody is ready to start a charity. That's what the program's for. But can you get ready over the course of trying it for the first year or so? So the way I think about the program is the program isn't 2 months, it's 2 months plus the first year of really trying to figure out what your charity is all about and that kind of thing. Do you think that you'd be ready by the end of that process? And if that excites you, then very cool. Yeah. It's a big leap and I don't know if I want to give up everything that I've been doing. So this is very fair. And it kind of stems on from the last point is that it seems like an enormous commitment. I'm going to completely change my life, go down this route, and then I'm kind of going down that path and I'm locked in. And I don't think it's a particularly accurate way of looking at it. So to illustrate this, I'll tell you a quick story. Federico came on the program last year, same year I did it. And he was an engineer and worked a lot with drones and was working a very good job in an engineering organization and wasn't sure that if he wanted to give up all of that and, all of the years he had spent training to be an engineer and pivot into this. He just wasn't sure. Of course, he couldn't be sure because he hadn't done the program yet. He hadn't even met his co-founder and he didn't know what idea he was going to do. So how does he make that decision? Well, what he did was he said, I'm just going to make the decision to dip my toe. So he went to his employers and he said, I'd like to take a month unpaid leave to explore this program. So he came on the program and after 2 or 3 weeks, he realized, wow, this really is something that I want to explore a lot further. So he goes back to his employer and he says, hey, I need a second month off. And they grumbled and they said, okay. So he continued through with the program, met his co-founder, Devin, agreed that they were going to launch HIP, got very good indications that they were likely to get funded. And, in weeks 6 or 7 or 8 or something of the program, finally went back to his boss and said, hey, yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. And they said they grumbled a lot more this time. And they said, right, fine, well, you still have to work off your contract. And he said, oh, I know. So he went back to work for them for a month after finishing the program to finish out his contract, and then left and then pivoted into his new charity, which is doing great. So I think it's not fair on yourself to expect you to be able to make this huge decision about your entire future without a lot of information. And you won't have that information until after you go on the program and until after you meet your founder and until after and so on. So give yourself a bit of a break and say, I'm not taking this massive leap in one go. I'm really just committing to doing the program and then seeing how it goes from there. I applied and I didn't get in. This is a very common concern. Again, we'll just say that obviously most people who apply don't get in. That's the nature of it. So you need to take that on the chin. And people have applied following years and have got on. And so one person in particular applied 4 times and got in, and has just launched what I think is potentially one of the highest impact charities that we will ever launch, in fact. So particularly strong candidate, but it took them a few goes to get ready. Okay. Yeah, one other concern that just pops into mind is that, should I go away and get more experience first? And I just very quickly ask you to, or invite you to think through that and say, well, which would be better? You getting two or 3 years experience working in another job and then starting the charity? Or would it be better to do 2 or 3 years of trying to start the charity and then running the charity? So, cumulatively, I think it's more about the relevance of your experience to what you end up doing that really matters. Okay, how does the application process work if you wanted to apply? Well, first off, you do a psychometric tool, which is a bunch of questions. I think it's 60 questions or something, and you upload your CV, and we're going to be able to give you quite a lot of feedback. So everybody now who applies will get feedback on how well suited they are. So that's kind of exciting, and we're hoping that that's just like net valuable for you, regardless of whether you progress. If you make it through to the first test task, then, so this is round 2, we ask you to compare your various career opportunities and to go through quite a kind of a rigorous analytical process of comparing and contrasting them. If you make it through that, you're in the top 5% or so. Then we're doing a recorded interview with you, and then we do a second test task, which is all around us understanding your thinking and your rationale, and then a final interview. So it's quite in-depth. If you make it all the way through, it takes possibly about 10 hours, but we don't ask you to do all that much unless you're progressing through, and it seems very likely that it's worth your while. And the first 2 components, the 2 big components at the start, they're both designed to be very useful to you regardless of whether or not you progress. And that's the feedback we keep getting year on year, is that, particularly that second test task. Wow, that was really valuable to me, and I actually decided I don't want to progress with charity entrepreneurship. I want to do this other thing. And we're like, super, we helped you to decide. So yeah. So finally, just to close up, imagine Rob Mather hadn't started the Against Malaria Foundation, or imagine Joey hadn't started Charity Entrepreneurship, GiveWell, OpenPhil, CEA, EAGs, the whole lot. And then just imagine, well, where could you fit into all of that? What's the small thing potentially that you could start that one day could become big? Because none of those guys had any sense of how big their operations would become. So just consider that one day you could be on that list, as it were. And lastly, just please go on our website, charityentrepreneurship.com, take the quiz, really consider this, think it through, see how much of this applies to you, and then apply in October or see you at the office hours later on in this conference. So yeah, thanks guys, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you for that talk, Steve. I see we've had a number of questions submitted already. So let's kick off with the first one. I see that our Swapcard live discussion has been quite busy, which is great. And Steve has been interacting with them. I think it would be great if we just could go over reiterate some of the questions that have been shared on Swapcard, just in case some of our listeners have missed out on them. Steve, if that's okay. Sure. I'll start with the first one from Christopher, who says that they have been engaged in a lot of student-led nonprofits. And their question is, why does EA focus on founding new organizations instead of realigning existing ones onto EA?
Yeah, so this is a great question. I don't know if I 100% agree that EA focuses on changing or just starting new organizations and not changing existing ones. There's a lot of people in EA working in policy, for example. They're all trying to change organizations from within. There's a lot of think tank work. They're all trying to change how other people do their work, I suppose, or how other people approach work. But certainly charity entrepreneurship is entirely focused on starting these new organizations. And the reason we go after that specifically is because in our experience and also in our understanding of how it works in the for-profit entrepreneurial space, it's just much easier to identify a real need and then build an organization that's precisely attuned to that one very specific need, and then build that organization from scratch and get it, everything about it. It's baked into the DNA around cost effectiveness, around evidence, all these kinds of things. Whereas if you're trying to take an existing organization that doesn't necessarily have those values, it has people working in roles already that are it would be very, very difficult to change the direction of that organization, particularly to the degree that we would be talking about here. So, one metric to have in your mind is that traditionally, at least, our research team has tried to target ideas when they're coming up with the ideas that we want to found that would be at least 5 times as effective as the Against Malaria Foundation. So imagine trying to take a normal charity, shall we say, and then trying to turn it into something that's 5 times as effective as one of the most effective charities on the planet. That's quite a tall order. Whereas if you try and start an organization from scratch, you can start with a blank slate and build everything up from there with on the basis of what we know from studying a whole bunch of these highly kind of or acutely effective organizations.
Thank you, Steve. And I guess this all leads up to another question, a very common question, and some that you touched on quite extensively in your presentation as well. And thank you for that. Is just imposter syndrome, or hesitations by people or possible founders who could be sitting on the potential to achieve such great things in terms of addressing some of our pressing global concerns. How did you know that you were a good fit for entrepreneurship?
Well, I didn't, and it's a path of discovery, shall we say? And it's a very difficult thing, and it's a difficult question, and imposter syndrome is rife within EA, particularly. I think we have the systemic problem of EAs being too humble. And we just look around and we see all these incredibly smart people and go, well, I'm not them, or some of us do. I do. And it can be very intimidating, but this path, I think, is a little bit more about getting stuff done, being adaptive, being a generalist. Yeah, you do have to work very hard, and you need a bit of gray matter and when it comes to decision making. But the majority of the time, I think, is really just, implementation. Certainly after the first phase, it is. And, this is an area where we're actually a bit starved in EA in some ways. We have an awful lot of very, very, very talented brains, but we need a lot of really good doers as well. Can I just tag on to the answer to that? We are going to go to office hours after this. So just if anybody wants to ask any more questions, it'll be more like back and forth as well. So we can do it that way. So directly into office hours in about 13 minutes or something.
Yes, it's right there on your swap cards. It's a Zoom, so still very much interactive with Steve, and you'll be able to see him and ask him directly whatever questions you have. We could type into that chat as well there if you may. But I think that's one of my favorite things about EA conferences, and the fact that we're able to translate that in the virtual space as well is great. So thank you so much for giving us your time as well, Steve. And one more question, I guess that speaks to something this is quite relevant, was a question on on resilience and robustness. Is this a trait that people can train? And if so, what are some of the methods to help us to reinforce that trait?
So I was a trainer for many years before doing this work, and resilience was one of the things that we actually trained other leaders in. So there's a thing called the resilience engine. You go look that up if you like. I think a lot of it comes down to feeling safe. So if you feel safe with your co-founders in that, like we're all in this together, you're not feeling like hierarchies or being threatened that you're going to be found out, back to imposter syndrome, then, you can know that it's possible that you might make a mistake and that things will be okay. The other team member or members will swoop in and you'll be all right. So that can add an awful lot to your resilience. And having clear goals, having clear understanding of why your goals are what they are, having a clear understanding of your culture and your mission and your, why we're doing this work at all, I've found has made me significantly more resilient than I was in my previous work, where I had, I worked in the corporate sector, and your client might turn around to you at the 11th hour and just kind of go, oh, we don't like this, we want it all to change. And you're just thrown for six. So I find this a much less frictionful, scary kind of position to be in, because we're very, very clear about what we're trying to achieve. We put a lot of thought into how we're going to achieve it, and then we're just implementing that plan. But the work is hard. It's really tough and it's challenging, but you're kind of in it together. So yeah, I don't know. So far, I'm only a year into it. I must say though, for me, it's just a completely different game, and I'd never go back to the other stuff. So yeah, but yeah, take it with a pinch of salt. I'm obviously biased, as I mentioned before.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 more questions, if you don't mind. What's your best advice for the audience, and what have you changed your mind about recently?
What was the first part of the question?
What's your best piece of advice for the audience? No pressure.
I just go, my best piece of advice is to apply, because if you don't apply, you don't get the information. If you do apply, you get a whole bunch of feedback. So I think I mentioned it in the talk, but if you apply, you fill out a psychometric, series of questions, and you're going to get a bunch of feedback. So that's just going to be useful information. Also, I didn't think that I'd get on the program. 50% of the people who succeed in the program don't think that they're going to get on the program. So clearly, the worst case scenario is that you think you're not going to make it, so therefore you don't apply, and then all of this fun and kind of purposeful work that you would otherwise do just evaporates because you didn't apply. So I do think the most important thing, that's the best advice, and it maps to like other things in my life that I did in the past that would be my best advice anyway, had I not come on the program. Like, I just did a bunch of projects earlier in life that I could have easily not said that I was going to do, but I gave them a shot, and they all, they turned into the best things that I ever did. The funnest things, or the things that connected me to the most impact, or the thing that connected me to the best people. So yeah, always step in rather than be reluctant, I think is, very easy to give advice, very hard to follow. And then the second part of the question was, just remind me again.
What have you changed your mind about recently?
So much, so often. So I think, as I mentioned in the talk, I also run Training for Good. So I split my time between the two organizations. And I think even in the short time that we've existed, we've managed to create a culture where you don't attach to your ideas, and you just, hey, I think, what about this? And what about that? And we're constantly updating and changing things, and, kind of going back to the drawing board and saying, hey, and the lack of ownership of ideas is super important. And this is totally different for me from what my previous work was, where you would kind of very much identify with your ideas. So yeah, I couldn't give a specific example, I'd say, but just constantly updating. And I think the fluidity that we have in the team is amazing. Like, we red team all of our proposals with each other. So like, 2 of us will hammer the person who's making the proposal and like try and rip the idea apart. And to be able to do that and people not get upset or feel that they're being attacked is really, really cool.
Okay, I guess the final question, just something, maybe a suggestion, if you may. Which books or articles would you recommend to the audience?
We will put a link for, application support into this, right? So I think you should read that again. And so what have I read recently that I've really, my favorite book of all time by far is Sapiens. So I would just encourage everyone to read Sapiens. So I know that's not highly relevant, but there you go.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve. Really incredible presentation. Thank you. High impact nonprofit. Okay. I hope you got a load of that. Maybe if you could also pop it into the Swapcard live discussion, that would be great. Thank you so much, Steve, for your incredible presentation. And I hope that you and your team receive a lot of applications for after this. There's nothing to lose. Just, I guess, people just need to take the leap. And thank you to our audience as well. This concludes our Q&A part of the session. And as a reminder, if you have any other questions for Steve or the Charity Entrepreneurship team, you can join their office hours happening straight after this session on Zoom. It's on Swapcard. All the details are on Swapcard under agenda. And you can just click on the link and it will take you right through to the room. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks, guys.